Hi, I'm Eric Siegel with ericstrains.com. Well, today we've got a fun one. This is something I'm sure a lot of you have been looking forward to. Here we have the latest 3-rail O-scale rendition of the Union Pacific FEF-3 Northern number 844 from Lionel. Okay, so here we have an engine that needs no introduction. The 844 is an extremely famous locomotive, at least here in the States. And because of that, I'm sure there are lots of people out there who know every single factoid about this engine. And so for that reason, I am not going to go into a super detailed history about the 844 because, quite frankly, I don't want to risk getting my facts wrong and then hearing about it for the rest of my life. And so I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the history, and then if you want to find out more, just Google it. That's the great thing about the internet. Okay, so the real UP-844 was built in 1944 as a member of the FEF-3 class of 484 Northerns. Now, it's kind of weird to say FEF-3 484 because FEF actually stands for 484. Now, what is 484? Well, for you newbies, 484 refers to the wheel arrangement on the locomotive. It means you've got 4 wheels on the lead truck, 8 drive wheels in the middle, and then 4 wheels on the trailing truck, so they call it a 484. Now, these are also called Northerns, and that's because the first American railroad to make significant use of the 484 wheel arrangement was the Northern Pacific Railroad, and so for that reason they got the nickname Northerns. Now, as many of you know, the 844 is still in service today. The Union Pacific uses it for excursion trains and stuff like that. So this is an engine that you can still see on the rails today. But what makes the 844 really special is that it has the distinction of being the only steam engine that was never retired by a Class 1 North American railroad. This was the last steam engine that was ever delivered to the Union Pacific, and they simply never retired it. It stopped running commercial service in the late 1950s, but they kept it on the active roster for special activities, and that's where it's been ever since. Now, although the 844 was never retired from service, it has had a couple different road numbers during its life. It started off with the number 844, but then between 1962 and 1989, it was renumbered as 8444, and that was because the UP had a GP30 on its roster that took the number 844. But once that GP30 was retired, the 8444 was renumbered back to 844, and it's been there ever since. Now, because the 844 has had 2 different road numbers during its life, Lionel is actually making 2 different versions of this model available. There's the 844 that you see here, and then there's also an 8444 as well. So that takes care of the history, and again, if you want to find out more, just Google UP-844 and you will find tons of information about this engine on the internet. So now let's talk about Lionel's rendition of the FEF-3. These were offered in the 2015 Volume 2 Lionel catalog, and then they started being delivered in early 2016. Now, I already mentioned that there's an 844 and an 8444 available, but Lionel has also produced 3 other versions that you can buy as well. There's an 844 in the Greyhound paint scheme. Then they've also got an 835 in the Greyhound paint scheme. And then lastly, there's an 838 in the black paint scheme like you see here. Now, the significance of the 838 is that it is still around today. It's actually in the Roundhouse in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and it is used as a source of spare parts for the 844. Let's go over some quick stats and facts on this model. The length of the engine itself is just under 17 inches. The length of the tender is just over 11 inches. The combined length of the engine and the tender is right at 28.5 inches. It's about 29 inches if you count the couplers. The weight of the engine is 8 pounds 5 ounces. The weight of the tender is 3 pounds 11 ounces. That gives us a combined weight of 12 pounds. This thing is heavy. This engine has pretty good pulling power at 2 pounds 12 ounces, and the minimum curve needed to operate this engine is 0.72. On the inside, this engine is powered by one large flywheel motor, which is located right about here. And then up in front, we've got a dual smoke unit that controls the smokestack and the smoking whistle, both of which you'll see later. And then back in the tender, we've got the electronics for legacy command control and legacy rail sounds. As usual, there are 3 ways you can operate this engine. The preferred method is to use Lionel's legacy command system, as that will give you access to all of the engine's advanced features and functions. However, you can also run the engine with Lionel's classic TMCC command system, or you can run this engine conventionally with just a transformer and some track. There's lots of cool stuff to see on this engine, but you really can't see it very well with this big wide shot I've got, so now let's go in for a closer look. Here's a look at the front of the engine, which in my opinion is the best looking spot on this model. Down here we've got some great add-on hose detailing. The Pilot looks awesome with some nice grille work, and the front of the Pilot swings open to reveal a dummy scale coupler. Now, the dummy scale coupler can be a little difficult to get out at times. Let me see if I can coax him out. There we go. There he is. And then, of course, if you want to double head the engine, you can swap out that dummy scale coupler for this dummy O-gauge coupler that's also packaged with the engine when you buy it. Up here, we've got an add-on coupler cut bar, and then above that, we've got lots of add-on detailing all over the place. We've got the start of the 2 handrails that run down either side of the engine. And then the front of the smoke box looks fantastic. As you can see, we've got the nice UP plate. And then above that, we've got an operating headlight with lighted number boards on either side. Above that, we've got the emergency light. Now, this may be a little confusing to some people because under normal operations, this will not work. The only time it lights up is when you do an emergency stop with the engine. And I'll show you what that's all about when we run this thing in just a few minutes. Anyway, above that, we've got a nice little brass bell, and then we've got operating marker lights on either side. And then once again up here, we've got lighted number boards. And then lastly, the front of the boiler does open up like that, and it is held shut with a magnet, so it will only open if you want it to. Around the side, you can see one of the 2 sets of cylinders on this engine, and it looks really nice, especially with these silver heads. And then right here, you can see all of this wonderful drive gear, which looks awesome when the engine is in motion. And you can also see these beautiful drive wheels as well. Toward the rear, the firebox area looks great. They've got all sorts of add-on piping all over the place. And then we've got a great looking trailing truck as well. As we move up, here's a side view of the all-weather cab on this engine, and it looks great. We've got some nice crisp numbering underneath the window here and some legible signage below that. All of the windows on the cab, including the front, the rear, which you'll see in a minute, and the side, have clear plastic inserts in them. And the side windows open up like that, which is always nice. On the inside of the cab, there are 2 hand-painted crew figures. There's a nicely detailed back head, and then the interior of the cab is illuminated, and that light does turn off when the engine starts moving. As we pull back and start to return to the front of the engine, you can see that on the side of the boiler, we've got lots of cast-in detailing, but we also have some nice add-on detailing like this piping here and the throttle linkage over here. Up front, we've got the big elephant ear smoke deflectors on this engine, and these are attached to the engine when you take it out of the box. Now, there's some really nice detailing back here, including some legible builder's plates, but you really can't see it all very well because of the smoke deflectors. So someone's going to ask me at some point, hey, can you take the smoke deflectors off? So let me go ahead and address that. Technically speaking, yes, you can remove them because they are separate pieces that are attached with screws. However, I would not recommend doing it because I don't think that's really what Lionel had in mind. For one thing, if you take them off, you'll have some screw holes that will be very visible, and it might detract from the look of the engine. And for another, I know I don't want to try it because I don't want to risk scratching up the engine or something like that. So yeah, technically speaking, you can remove them, but my recommendation is just to leave them where they are. Here's a quick look at the other side of the engine. It looks pretty much like the side you've already seen, although there are a few subtle differences. Now let's check out the top of the engine. Up front, we've got a nicely detailed feed water heater, and then behind that, we've got the twin smokestack, and there is a fan-driven smoke unit down in there. And as always, to load smoke fluid into the smoke unit, you simply pour the smoke fluid directly down the stack. Now, when the engine is brand new out of the box, you want to add maybe 15 to 20 drops of smoke fluid to get it started. So you just take your bottle of smoke fluid and drip it down in there like that. And that's all there is to it. And then a little tip is that when you're done adding smoke fluid, anytime you add smoke fluid, what I like to do is to lean over the engine and just gently blow down into the stack, and that will dislodge any bubbles that might prevent the smoke from getting out. Right behind the smokestack is the whistle, and as you can see, it looks great. Now, this engine is equipped with the whistle steam smoke effect, which means that when you blow the whistle on this engine, smoke will shoot out of this hole and give the illusion of steam shooting out of the whistle. It's really cool. If you've never seen it before, you'll see it in just a few minutes. Now, the smoke unit that controls the whistle steam smoke effect draws its smoke fluid from the same reservoir as the smokestack. So when you pour smoke fluid down the smokestack, you are supplying smoke fluid for the smokestack and the smoking whistle. As we continue to move back, we've got some nice looking add-on pipe work up here. Then we've got a nicely done sand dome, and then back behind that we've got some hand-painted pop-off valves. As we approach the rear, we've got a nice looking dynamo here, and then some good cast-in details all around. And then finally, up on the roof of the cab, there's a vent that opens up like that. Here's a look at the back of the engine. There's really not much to see because this engine has an all-weather cab, but down here we've got the drawbar that has the infrared sensor on top that allows the electronics in the engine to communicate with the electronics in the tender. And then above that, we've got a couple of separately applied grab irons, some nice cast-in detailing all around, and like I said earlier, clear plastic inserts in the windows. Here's a look at the underside of the engine. We've got 3 pickup rollers here in the middle, and then on the last set of drivers there are 2 traction tires, and then underneath the cab there are 3 control switches. Right here is the switch to turn the smoke unit on and off, and then over here we've got the Odyssey speed control switch and the run program switch. Okay, so that takes care of the engine. Now let's check out the tender, and the tender on this engine is really well done. Down here at the bottom, we've got the big centipede, 7 axles. We've got some nice detailing on the lead truck, and if you look at the bearing caps, they have the Timken name on them. How cool is that? We've got lots of nice add-on detailing all over the place, including these really nice ladders. I'll show you a close-up of those in just a minute. On the sides, we've got lots of nice cast-in rivet detailing, and then of course in the middle we've got the nice UP logo. Now, speaking of the UP logo, Lionel did something with this engine that is really, really cool. When you buy the engine, included in the box, you'll find a little Ziploc baggie that contains 2 alternate nameplates for the tender that say Lionel lines on them. They've got 2 plates in there, one for each side of the tender. The plates are made of metal, and the area behind the logo on the tender on each side is magnetic. So all you have to do is stick it on the tender. And forgive me if I don't get this perfectly lined up. I'm doing it really quickly for the video. But there you go, Lionel lines on your tender. And what makes this really special is that it's actually prototypical. A few years back, the LCCA, the Lionel Collectors Club of America, somehow got the UP to temporarily put Lionel lines on the 844 tender for an excursion trip. So if you go online and do a search, you'll find all sorts of videos on YouTube of the 844 running with Lionel lines on the tender. I mean, how cool is that? In the entire history of Lionel trains, when have you ever been able to put Lionel lines on an engine and have it be prototypical? It doesn't get much better than that. Here's the front of the tender. We've got some nicely done ladders on either side, and then we've got some separately applied grab irons. Most of the rest of the detailing is cast into the shell, and then down here we've got the other end of the drawbar with the other infrared sensor that allows the electronics in the engine to communicate with the electronics in the tender. On the other end, we've got a ladder on each side, and I mentioned these a minute ago, and here's a close-up, and you can see they're really well done. They're kind of sunken into the body. They look great. On the back of the tender, we've got an electrocoupler down here that can be thrown from the Legacy or TMCC remote. We've got some nice cast-in details. We've got a couple of operating marker lights up here. We've got a couple of nice separately applied grab irons on the top, and then in the middle, we've got a red reverse light. The top of the tender looks great. Of course, this is an oil-fired engine, so there is no coal load, but we do have some nice add-on handrails up here and some piping as well. And then these three hatches back here all lift up, and then under this last hatch is the master volume control for the engine. Finally, here's a look at the underside of the tender. We've got two pickup rollers here in the middle. There's a sensor right here for the Lionel LCS sensor track if you choose to use one. And then underneath all of this, we've got two speakers for the sound system. All right, the last thing we're gonna do before we power this thing up and start having some fun with it is BF-IMO, best feature in my opinion. So my pick for best feature may seem a little strange, but hey, BF-IMO is all about my personal opinion, so I can say whatever I want. But my favorite feature is actually the Lionel lines nameplates that can go on the tender. I think these are really cool, and I've never seen something like this on a model steam engine, and that makes it special. The first thing I think of when I think about this model now is these interchangeable plates. They're so cool. And you know, never in my life have I been able to put Lionel lines on a model and have it be prototypical, but that's the case here, and that makes it something really cool. So my pick for best feature is these interchangeable nameplates. All right, we've got power on the track, so let's go ahead and start this thing up and have some fun.
This is the dispatcher. Do you copy?
Copy that, dispatcher. I read you. Over.
Okay, start her up. Stand by for track orders.
Gotcha, dispatcher. Let's get to work. Out.
Okay, first up, let's check out the whistle. And again, this engine does have the whistle steam smoke effect. So if you look closely, you'll see smoke shooting out of the whistle. Next, let's check out the bell. There's a steam blowdown sound effect, so let's check that out. There's also a sound effect for water being added to the tender, so let's check that out.
The water's full. Over.
Roger that. Out.
And there's also a sound effect for oil being added to the tender. That's activated by pressing and holding the reset button on the Legacy remote, which, in case you don't know, is this button right here, the one with the R on it. Lastly, let's check out some of the crew talk sounds, and as I always say, I know some of you guys don't like them. That's okay. If you don't like them, you don't have to use them.
Dispatcher here. Please stand by. Over.
Yes, sir. Sit tight. Out.
Dispatcher here. You're cleared outbound. Over.
Copy that. Cleared to move. Here we go. Out.
By the way, the voice of the engineer is Rich Melvin.
Dispatcher, stopped and ready to offload. Over.
Roger that. Welcome back. Out.
Dispatcher, are we clear through the diamond? Over.
Yep, you have a clear track. Over.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, let's go ahead and move it out.
Got your signal, dispatcher. We're clear to move. Over. Tower, here we go. Over.
Roger that. Have a good run. Out.
All right, that about does it for this review. As you've seen, this is a gorgeous model of the 844, and it's a whole lot of fun to run, and that's kind of par for the course for Lionel these days. Now, if you're interested in buying one of these, regardless of whether you buy the 844 that you see here or the 8444, the retail price is exactly the same. It's right at $1,700. Although if you go through a good Lionel dealer, you can probably get a decent discount off that retail price. And as always, if you're looking for a good Lionel dealer, try my favorite train store, which is Legacy Station. You can find them on the web at www.legacystation.com or give them a call at 770-339-7780. Anyway, that's it for now. I'm Eric Siegel, and I'll see you next time. To discuss this model or any other O-Gauge trains and to meet other O-Gauge modelers, check out the O-Gauge Railroading Magazine online forum at ogrforum.ogaugerr.com.